In some hi-fi circles, the thought of advocating for a home theater receiver in any situation is about the same as calling someone's baby ugly. And the mere idea of using one for stereo playback, don't even think about it. And I've never quite understood the distaste for AVRs, nor have I understood the blind adoption of every new tiny amp DAC of the month. And this makes me really confused, especially when products like ONKYO's TX-SR3100 receiver can be had for the same price. But I digress. The SR3100 from ONKYO is a 5.2 channel Dolby Atmos enabled receiver that produces 80 watts per channel into 8 ohms using a Class AB style amplifier. When it comes to home theater speaker layouts, you can configure the ONKYO as a more traditional 5.2 setup, a 3.2.2 Atmos one, and just about everything in between. Regardless of the speaker layout you choose, the 3100 has ONKYO's AccuEQ room calibration, making setup and tuning relatively plug and play. While the ONKYO comes with 2 subwoofer preamp outs, they are not independent of one another. And since we're talking about a sub $400 product, I think we can all agree that that is forgivable. For less than $400, the 3100 has a lot to offer, including 4 HDMI 2.1 inputs and 1 HDMI 2.1 output with ARC and eARC support. And all of the HDMI inputs and outputs support video signals up to 8K, 4K, 120 with additional support for major HDR formats, even Dolby Vision. Gamers, the 3100 hasn't forgotten about you. There's support for VRR and ALLM, and if you're a first-person gamer, this is going to come in real handy. Additional digital input options include a single optical and coaxial input. Radio listeners, you're going to appreciate the FM and AM tuner, but one thing you aren't going to find is a built-in phono preamp. That said, vinyl fans can use one of the ONKYO's 3 analog audio inputs to connect a third-party phono preamp or just use a turntable that has a preamp built in. Now, wireless connections are limited to Bluetooth. There is no Wi-Fi or even Ethernet present here, which means the 3100 has no built-in streaming. This will disappoint some, myself included. However, if you prefer to use a separate streamer, you can, and you'll avoid any redundancy. For those of you who appreciate knowing what we used to test the ONKYO, we relied on 2 different sets of speakers, one budget and one that you're probably going to get upset with me about. The YAMAHA 7 series covered in last week's review was primarily used here, and this twosome is going to set you back just under $1,500, making the combo an obtainable way to get into home theater. Now, I also tested the 3100 with Focal's new Aria Evo X speakers in order to give you an idea of how this receiver will work with larger and more difficult to drive speakers in a larger space like ours. And before you hit the comment section, I know that the likelihood of anyone pairing speakers like the Evos with a product like the ONKYO is 0 to none. But that's besides the point. The goal here is to push the ONKYO to its limits, and surprise, surprise, the 3100 stood up like a champ when put into higher end service, which is more than I can say for a lot of the TI-based amps like the WiiM, which fall completely to pieces when paired with speakers that have wildly fluctuating impedances. The 98-inch Sony X90L, Apple TV 4K, Sony PS5 were all also used, and because the 3100 lacks streaming support, I brought out our WiiM Pro streamer. I could have totally gotten away with using our Apple TV 4K for streaming, and I often do, but I wanted to see how the ONKYO WiiM experience measured up against the WiiM amp on its own. Let's talk room correction. I used ONKYO's AccuEQ room correction on both sets of speakers, and I also experimented with a full manual setup. And the ONKYO made it easy to adjust the speakers to my liking manually, and it performed trouble-free once the latest firmware update was installed. Now, before the firmware update, I did encounter a few bugs in the form of signal dropouts when using an HDMI connection, but the update has corrected this. My warning is that you're gonna need to use a USB drive to download firmware updates because the convenience of an over-the-air update is just not possible with the 3100. Now, control over the 3100 is handled 2 ways, either by using the included remote and the Emotiva-like dot matrix on-screen menus, or using a third-party device like our Apple TV remote. The Apple TV remote works great for basic functions like power on-off and volume. The 3100's higher functions, though, they're going to require you use the included remote. Before we get to sound quality, let me just get one thing out of the way. Regardless of the loudspeaker, whether it was the 4-ohm YAMAHA's or the wildly fluctuating Focal Aria Evo X's, the Onkyo never, I repeat, never skipped a beat. The 3100 drove both speakers to well above 90 dB comfortably, with peaks cresting at times at 100 dB. While I don't hit volumes that loud on the regular, that would quickly take me down the path of hearing damage, it's important to note that this receiver delivered the power cleanly and confidently. In direct comparison to the similar spec and priced WiiM amp, the WiiM routinely shut down well before reaching those volumes on the same speakers. And for those of you who are thinking maybe we have a bad unit, we now have two WiiM amps, and both of them struggle with complex signals like music and movies at higher volumes with speakers whose impedance dip into, say, 4 ohm territory. So how does it sound? Well, when listening in stereo, the Onkyo's overall sound is balanced from top to bottom with equally impressive dynamics and in-room presence. Going back to my WiiM comparison, as I increased the volume, the Onkyo maintained a linear and more balanced sound, whereas the TI-based WiiM skewed more treble forward, lean, and shouty. The 3100 sound and power delivery scale confidently as you turn things up, which is what you want from any amplifier, no matter its cost. Listening to some of my go-to demo songs like Home from Dominic Fils Ami and The Noose from A Perfect Circle, the 3100 delivered a balanced, neutral, and detailed performance. The old saying, you get what you pay for, rings true even with the Onkyo. I'm not going to inflate the 3100's performance and claim that it was as separated, dimensional, or as texturally nuanced as the more expensive receivers like Onkyo RZ50, Marantz Cinema 50, or Denon's A1H. That said, it's on par tonally with one of our favorite budget receivers, the SONY 1000. Like the SONY, the Onkyo has a more in-room or forward presence, meaning singer-songwriters sit in line or just slightly in front of the speaker's front baffles, with the rest of the band or soundstage not that far behind. This gives the Onkyo a more lively feel, which is pretty common at this price point. Still, it is nowhere near as forward as the WiiM. Speaking of WiiM, adding a WiiM streamer to the Onkyo was a great pairing, giving me the best of both worlds, at least when listening to streaming music. You get the ease of use and flexibility of the WiiM streamer with the better amplification and versatility of the Onkyo for a nominal increase in the total cost of ownership. Now, watching big action movies like Top Gun, Midway, or Ford vs. Ferrari was awesome. Whether I had the YAMAHA set up as a 5.1 system or I was rocking a 2.1.2 Atmos setup anchored by the focals with our in-ceiling clipped speakers, the Onkyo always delivered. Tonally, again, the Onkyo sounded the same with movies as it did with music, neutral to maybe a touch forward with good oomph down low in the bass. The dynamics were most impressive when I turned things up. While your room may result in a different experience, in our room, the Onkyo was most cinematically alive at volumes around 50 and higher. This resulted in an average volume, again, in our room, in the high 60 to low 70 dB range, with peaks cresting above 85 dB. Watching big action films at these levels, I think you're going to have a hard time telling the 3100 apart for some higher priced AVRs, especially if you use a subwoofer, even a budget sub like the Klipsch SPL100. For surround sound, the 3100 responds well to a variety of speaker arrangements. Its virtualization settings and profiles can make a standard 5.1 setup sound more like an Atmos one, and it even does a respectable job of creating a sense of surround channels in a 3.1.2 setup. Regardless of your number of speakers, as long as it's not more than 5, the Onkyo is capable of delivering a cinematic surround sound experience. Before I get into a few of my nitpicky performance notes, I do have some quick thoughts on Onkyo's HDMI switching and performance. It's solid after the firmware update, and while it's not the fastest I've seen, the HDMI was reliable. Gaming was even more impressive, whether I was at 4K 120 or in HDR with VRR. I had no problems, and while I'm not a competitive gamer, I didn't notice any additional lag, which is something I know a lot of gamers worry about. So overall, not bad considering we're discussing a sub $400 AVR. At the end of my evaluation, I had 3 notes in the "it could be better" column. For starters, you will hear a click from the receiver when you reach a certain volume level. In our case, this seemed to occur around 50. This is normal, do not be alarmed. I'm going to spare you the details as to why this happens, just know that the 3100 isn't the only AVR to do this. Turning off the eco settings will not make the click stop either. I wouldn't consider this a deal breaker, but if you get home and you wonder, do you have a busted unit? you don't. Now, I loved the inclusion of Onkyo's automated room ACU EQ. It's very effective, but if you're hoping for options like, say, Dirac or Odyssey, you're gonna have to keep looking. I preferred the sound of the Onkyo with no room correction or when using an all-manual setup, and my preference for manual adjustments is pretty much par for the course, so no big surprise there. If your room or layout is less than ideal, the 3100's room correction, though, it can help tighten things up. Now, the 3100 has a dialogue enhancement feature, and it will definitely make most vocal ranges stand out, but it does so at the expense of the rest of the amp's tonality by injecting quite a bit of energy into your speaker's response across the board, starting at around 100 Hz. When the dialogue setting is set to anything greater than +1, the receiver sounds more forward and brighter, and it may even cause some of you fatigue. So I would keep this in mind. Using the dialogue boost in its lowest setting is totally fine, but I highly advise not going much beyond that. Now, if you're looking at alternatives to the Onkyo compared to some of my favorite budget AVRs, I'm talking about receivers under $1,000, like say the Sony 1000. This one is actually kind of close. Before you get too excited, the Sony is the better and more well-equipped receiver. If you can stretch your budget long term, I don't think you're going to be sorry, but if you don't plan on needing more than say 5 speakers or are eyeing the 3100 more for stereo use because you already own a streamer like the WiiM, save your money and get the Onkyo. Yamaha's V6A, it's been out for a while, but it's still a comparable product. Similar to the Sony, the Yamaha offers more channels and a little bit more flexibility, so if you can extend your budget or you have the time to save up, the Yamaha will serve you well. Word of caution though, the Yamaha is a more complicated to set up receiver and is better suited for more experienced users. First timers, you're just gonna have an easier time using the Sony or the Onkyo. When it comes to sound, the Yamaha is the most neutral of the three in this comparison, but knowing what kind of listening preferences you have will help you in making the final decision between these three. There's also the ONKYO 5100, which we reviewed a while back. Now, the sound was obviously going to be similar. The 5100 is going to be more flexible, though. It has 7 channels. It has similar specs, but you do get built-in streaming and a few other modern conveniences. My gripe with the 5100 continues to be its pushpin style binding post, but if that's not a concern for you, the 5100 is a better value at the time of this recording, aka it's on mad sale right now. But if you're looking for, say, a slightly more laid-back sound, check out Denon's 670H, which is also currently on sale. As for the recently announced ultra-affordable Pioneers, they have more than a little bit in common with the Onkyo, but we haven't tested them yet, so go with God. Now, I had initially requested the Onkyo in order to compare it to the WiiM because at a similar price point, I hope to provide you with a worthy alternative, and I believe I've made my case. The Onkyo's amplifier, sound quality, and features make it the better sounding and more versatile product. And you can add any of WiiM's streamers and have one of the better and more flexible budget setups that I can currently find on the market right now. Like I said at the top of this review, I know the topic of receivers can be a 4-letter word in hi-fi circles, but if you're interested in exploring this hobby for the very first time, an AVR is a great place to start. It's how I started almost 30 years ago at the age of 14. What was true then still holds up today. The ONKYO 3100 is a perfect example of this. You can also enjoy stereo music at a respectable level while growing into home theater if you so choose. But the best part is you won't go broke finding out what type of listener you really are before making your next hi-fi or home theater purchase. So that's it. That's my take on ONKYO's brand new 3100 5.2 channel AV receiver. Now it's time for you guys to tell me, what do you think? Obviously, my question of the day is, can you use an AVR for hi-fi playback? What do you guys think? I wish I could attach a poll, but I can't, so be kind, but let me know what you think. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Go ahead and ring that bell so that you're notified when any new videos come out. If you use any of the links that Chrissy's left for you down below, know that that's a great way that you've continued to show your support for this channel and the work that we both do here, and both of us thank you very much. And if you're wondering, well, what about Christy? You know that you need to tune in on Friday for the follow-up to this review and her thoughts on the ONKYO 3100. But until then, in the meantime, keep yourself busy by following me on Instagram at Recovering Audiophile, and that is it for us today. So remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video. Bye.